Good morning, guys. Today on the channel, I brought you a special guest. I've wanted to interview him for a long time. We made it. Joining us is Francesco Narmenni from Quitting Work. Hello, Francesco.
Hello, Fabio. Thank you so much for this invitation, for this opportunity. I thank you very much.
No, don't mention it. Look, I'm a die-hard fan of yours, let's say, and so I wanted to interview you. Among other things, I also wanted to say the reason why I decided to interview you. Because one of my goals, which I will also talk about on the channel, is to retire at 60. So a little bit early, not too much though. And since it's one of the topics you cover, both on your channel, on your blog, and in your books, I said I must interview him. Today in this interview, we will also talk about two of the books that Francesco has written. Okay, they are Stop Working and Rich Only by Saving, which are two books that I devoured, Francesco. So I will also ask you some questions about these two books. So first of all, I wanted to understand an important concept that I think should be shared. The fact of being happy, living with little, which I think is a concept that for me was completely unknown. And I would like you to explain a little bit, that you shared this concept a bit.
Yes, look, in general, for how we grow, for how we are born within society, for how we are educated, even instructed, if we want, we usually think the opposite. That is, the fact that abundance, having, possessing, the possibility of obtaining, of having for oneself, of also reaching certain goals, represents happiness in our life. Well, this I consider, but obviously it's my personal opinion, on which, however, I have based a good part of my life and my life choices. This paradigm that society imposes on us, in my opinion, is completely wrong. In the sense that we take for granted that wealth, comfort, opportunities essentially derive from possessing, from having, from achieving goals, when in fact it's a big deception, because in most cases, when you achieve a goal, when you get something, when you reach what you want to reach, but especially when you buy things, when you spend money to have, you soon realize that this happiness you get through purchasing is a very fleeting happiness. Not that it's not real happiness, it is real happiness, because everyone, for example, I don't know, for example, when we buy a new cell phone, we enjoy its newness, shiny appearance, and new features. We are very happy to have it the first few days. We are absolutely thrilled. The problem is that this happiness lasts very little, and then we need to find something else, a new object, a new service, a new goal to reach, even if we want to re-experience that happiness. Well, this would be fine too. The problem is why. To pursue these goals, to keep up this constant need for happiness that we pursue through purchasing, precisely, we are forced to comply with the rules of society, which are to work all the time, in order to buy objects that cost us money for our entire life. And so we end up living a life essentially working, doing things we almost always detest. Most people do jobs they don't love very much, and therefore live a life of continuous work and effort to attain this brief happiness, which requires constant reinforcement. Here you can instead replace, that is completely change this paradigm and say, I don't need to have, I eliminate all things, I eliminate all these superfluous needs, and I live minimally. What do you discover? What's the big discovery after some time? Beyond the classic thoughts, which are the ones that lead us to say yes, but without things, or without buying, without being able to afford something, I would lead a great life, I would lead a very sad life. You discover that those things are actually not really necessary. They are just ways to achieve happiness, very quick, very instant, to understand, also quite easy in the short term, and can be replaced. This happiness can be replaced through instead the relationship with others. If we manage to have a harmonious and happy relationship with others, a deep relationship of mutual understanding and mutual love, it is understood that all that happiness that we obtain through objects is found in the relationship with others. And moreover, this choice, above all, no longer condemns us to a life of work. Because if you no longer need to obtain happiness through purchase, you can choose, for example, as I did, to no longer work or to work very little. And so have, for example, a lot of time available, time that indeed you will dedicate to the relationship with others. In my case, for example, because I'm a 40-year-old adult, so in the relationship with the family, with the children, with my elderly parents, with those few true friends that I have chosen to keep, this long-term happiness, above all, turns out to be much deeper, lasting, satisfying than ephemeral happiness that requires ongoing economic support, especially for happiness and purchases. So living with little is not a renunciation. This is the key formulation. The important thing to say is not a renunciation, but it is an understanding that happiness, the real deep one, goes through other channels.
In fact, this is a concept that I liked a lot. This is to stop working. This concept, in fact, at the beginning, I said, okay, this is a beautiful book. I went to read it with enthusiasm because already this concept that makes you reflect and therefore also puts you a little in doubt. All the thing you believed in, first you say, okay, there's something I need to change. So shifting from having to relationships,
very important, because relationships are then the only thing you really have. You may truly own things, but they always have an expiration date and only bring temporary happiness. Instead, relationships, the real ones, the deep ones, last forever. And then when you really need it, then people are there. If you have proven to be a truly reliable person with whom you can have a deep, serene, transparent relationship, even of true love, we could also say those people will always be there when you need them, and eventually everyone needs help. Things will not help us. People, on the other hand, will help us. They will give us comfort. They will give us support. So it's a happiness that's really much deeper, much more complex, even articulated, than the mere happiness that comes through purchase. Again, this is real happiness, not imaginary. The issue is it's temporary and comes at a price.
yes, indeed, I too, at a certain point, realized that I didn't want to live to work. To keep having to pay, and work like a damn. For what? I said, no, I need to make a change here. Then, well, I'll make a small digression. I had a period, by the way, I will soon publish a bit of my story on the channel. I had a difficult period financially. Okay, because it was also a matter of income, which was little wrong choices, but also because my way of seeing money, of managing money, was completely wrong. So then I met you, your videos, your book came at just the right time. And I must say that thanks only to stopping working, I have earned, that is, in the sense, an investment of 12 euros 90 allowed me to save at the moment 3,400 euros a month. So I would say it was worth it. And I would like that because, in my opinion, the concept of saving is misunderstood. That is, in people, when we talk about saving, it means, well, you also give this example. I find the television subscription at a 30% discount. I subscribe and I have saved. Can you really explain to us what saving means?
Well, then I have a very extreme approach to saving. This is important to say because, in the sense that I know not everyone is like me and I know not everyone thinks like me. However, let's say I really feel this, I tell you this as a premise. I really take real pleasure in not spending money. I really like seeing all the advertisements, all the media conditioning that comes and tries to push me to buy, because we live in a world where everything conspires against us in order to push us to buy. I really like seeing that these messages do not influence me. And when I walk around the city, I'm not attracted to the window display of beautiful shoes or the wonderful jacket. I feel very strong in not being attracted to those messages. For me, saving is 100% saving. When they tell you, like you were saying, for example, buy the XPay TV subscription without naming names that we give you at 30% discount. For me, the real discount would be the 100% that you would get if you did not subscribe to that subscription. And so this approach of mine is very, very extreme. and has naturally led me to save a lot of money. So over the years, I have managed to save a lot of money that has then allowed me to invest it in building a house where I live. So having financial peace of mind that then allowed me to live without working, to quit my job with great ease. In the end, I live minimally and do only what interests me since I realize I don't need money. What I think is important to emphasize about the issue of saving is that many people consider it a form of stinginess, a form of, in short, those horrible terms that the system has ingrained in our heads. That is, if you don't spend money, you're stingy, you're a miser, etc. But all these terms are specifically designed to push us to spend because we live within an economic system that works exactly in this way. That is, if you spend, things move forward, people, the economy will say. If you don't spend, the economy as it is configured doesn't work. Well, actually, let's say that every expense you make, if you look at your personal reality, every expense you make impoverishes you. No, and money, and this is a concept that is present in my second book, which you showed earlier. I'm saving. According to my concept, money should only be used to generate more money and not to indulge in whims or buy things for the mere sake of owning them. For me, the concept that economic wealth depends on is dictated by is extremely wrong, is somehow configured. Depends on the things you own, because the things you own in most cases cost you more economic wealth to maintain. Let's take the trivial example of a car. Do you think you're rich because you could afford to buy a well-off, or at least appear rich because you bought a car for 30, 40, 50,000 euros? In reality, that car then costs you annually to maintain it another economic wealth. So it's a money pit. You have created a pit in your life that only absorbs money. And so you, to show others that you are rich and well off, in reality, you become increasingly poorer. It's the paradox of our society. And that's why saving, in my opinion, is the right thing to do.
Absolutely, I agree on this. Another example that I like that you made in your books, instead of thinking about saving, so going to buy shoes at the market for 10 euros, I buy 10 pairs though. I buy a pair of proper shoes, I pay for it, maybe even 100, 120 euros, but then it lasts me 5 years.
Absolutely. Quality is fundamental. But this is part of a broader concept that also involves the whole philosophy we carry forward. As a unit on my channel, on my blogs, that the philosophy of voluntary simplicity, which is not voluntary stupidity, it's not about saying I spend very little, as little as possible in all aspects. No, I also make purchases when there is a need. Those things that I know will last, that I know are a fundamental purchase. I don't know. There are things that make sense to buy. I don't know. For example, I spent X euros to buy a mixer, just to give an example. Obviously, I could have kneaded the bread myself, considering I do a lot of homemade production, bread, pizza, cakes, anything you want made by hand. But it would have been very foolish because that time that I would have wasted kneading pizza by hand for half an hour. It's time I cut out things that don't bring me greater economic benefits. So it's a fairly disillusioned revolution, ours. It's logical to spend on things worth buying. How did you do it, for example? You go to the market for shoes, you buy 15 euro shoes, you know they will last 2 months, you buy 80 euro shoes, in short, of a good brand, well sewn. You need to recognize it, like how wool sweaters made a certain way are warmer than synthetic ones. Even if you pay more for them, etc., it makes a lot of sense to spend well, where in the long run this thing saves you money.
Yes, 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 I agree. I too have made this mental switch because it's not easy anyway. Then precisely what surrounds us, the thoughts and the way of seeing money. Things are these, and I must also say something that you said at the beginning, which is actually true. When on the subject of saving, when you start saving, you see that you can do it and that the nest egg grows. That is, you get more pleasure in putting away 100 euros, 200 euros, rather than buying an object.
Yes, because often this thing is misunderstood as feeling satisfied from accumulating. But it's not this. It's feeling strong in the face of a system that instead conditions us at every moment to purchase. Whoever is watching this video, advertisements will likely appear while they are watching it. And this shows how everything is profit. Everywhere you try to make a profit. Being strong against these messages and not being influenced, that's the real goal. It's not about saying how nice my bank account is increasing too, because then at a certain point, you will use that bank account to make purchases and investments that will generate more money for you, which are not in turn. This investment in turn is not aimed at accumulating more. It is aimed at having economic tranquility that gives you the possibility to be more free. That is not having to work every day, for example, and having to abide by rules that you don't like, even in the workplace. Having someone who commands you, someone who can pick up the phone even on Saturday and tell you to come to work because we need you, and you have to say yes, yes, sir. This is what money serves to obtain freedom.
Nice. I like it. And I wanted to ask you another question, a curiosity of mine, since it goes, well, it's a bit what I want to do too. And since I made some mistakes in the past, I wanted to understand if you could tell me, if you feel like it, your story of how you made the transition precisely from being an employee to stop working. So how did you manage it?
So it was a slow transition because everything that I tell in my books, even on the YouTube channel, in the live streams, etc., had not been previously thought out. That is, I had not found someone who had, in quotes, coded this process in a practical, schematic way. So now telling it, it may seem simple. The problem is that 10 years ago, when I did it, no one had ever written it anywhere. At least not in Italy, then abroad. I honestly don't know. So I really had to invent a path. So it was a slow journey. This is the mental switch. I was the one who had to say it. I don't want to spend my whole life forced to work, forced to follow, to do things that I hate doing. Because I was working in Bologna. At that time, I was working for a large information technology company in the banking sector. And I had been away from home for months. I worked in Bologna for nearly 2 years. And psychologically, I couldn't take it anymore, being away from home from Monday to Friday. At the time, I was living in a hotel, commuting by train, by plane. I worked in Rome, but after a while, I couldn't handle it mentally anymore. To be honest, my weeks are just full work weeks. I go home on the weekends. I don't have time to do anything because I just have time to tidy up the house and do the shopping. I don't know, these minor things. And then I return on Monday to work all week in Bologna. It was there that at a certain point I said, enough. Now it's time to find a solution to this thing. And I remember well that the idea of reducing consumption, because the problem that everyone has is people always ask me, stopping work is fine, but how will you make money? To live? Here's the idea of reducing consumption as a way to no longer need all that money you earn to live, but much less, and therefore work much less at least. I had it one morning when I was having coffee. It's something I wrote about on my blog. I think it's even the first post on my blog. Stop washing the dot information technology of 2011, if I remember correctly. One morning having coffee from the classic coffee machine, the ones that are in the halls of company offices. I mimed drinking coffee, then realized I'd already finished it moments earlier. No, and so for me, it had become such an automatic gesture to pay for coffee in the morning, so automatic, so thoughtless. Here is this gesture that no longer even gave me satisfaction. It no longer even gave me that pleasure of coffee. And from there, I asked myself how many things I do automatically, which in reality give me no pleasure, no satisfaction, but cost me money. And then there, the idea came to say, I try to reduce to the maximum all these money outflows that I have, which in fact give me no pleasure. They are just automatic behaviors. I only spend because that's how I was taught to do, buy, etc., and start putting money aside, not needing it so much anymore. At that point, after I requested and during my sabbatical year, I made some very precise calculations of how much money I needed to live. I realized I could live on 500 euros a month without working. because even working is a cost, moving, going away, eating out, in short, working life has a cost, especially for those who live in big cities. I realized I could live with little. At that point, I had the opportunity to take a part-time job in front of me. Then, in my case, luck and also computer knowledge meant that by telling this thing on the blog then became the income source that precisely covered the 500 euros I needed to live. And so at a certain point, I said, you know what? I quit right away and live without working. However, I repeat, told like this, it seems a quick process. In reality, it was a very long process that required also a quite strong introspective analysis. No, because you have everything, as you say, excuse me.
I mean, it's more the work maybe that you had to do on yourself, on the mentality that then in practice, the fact of working.
Yes, because you are born in a living environment. You grow up, especially in an environment where they tell you that life, the most you can get from life is to have a job, a family, a house, eventually retire, and then die. And so you say, I already have all this because I have a job, a family, a house. Why am I not happy? You ask yourself, you say, but what is the problem? You're depressed, you have a problem, you have a mental problem. It's a thing you think. In reality is that you're not happy because you're not free. You're not free to choose what to do every day. And this thing, when I finally understood it, was very liberating for me, both very revealing and very liberating. Why did I say wow? But then that's why I'm not happy, because I wake up in the morning and it's not like I can say there's the sun. I go to the mountains, or in 5 days, I'll fly to the Canary Islands. I couldn't do it, but I had to go to work every day. This lack of freedom made me unhappy, and I believe it makes most people in the world unhappy. Many people, in short, well, this freedom is obtained by ceasing to have needs. What we were talking about at the beginning, and living with little, having few needs, and therefore needing little money. And therefore being free to live as you want, clearly with some limitations, you won't be able to do many of the things you used to do. However, when you put your freedom on the scale, with the rest, you have to understand for yourself which side weighs more.
In fact, realizing also the fact that you can live with 500 euros. One says, how do you do it? You don't live anymore. You don't do anything anymore. Absurdly. A few days ago, my wife and I sat down at the table to do the budget, the balance of 2021. Since we want to change houses, we have some goals. So we need to scrape together some money, making some adjustments. So a normal saver, not extreme, as you tell in the book, that is, even my wife realized that we could live with 1,400 euros, 1,500 euros. She says, wow, we can put all my salary away and it's not a little. She was like that. But you realize that by making some adjustments now, maybe not taking everything away as you did, as much as you did, but with some adjustments. I mean, living on a single salary for a family is huge. It's a lot, especially
since if you can save a whole salary, say another dollar, 1,500. In Italy, the average is between 1,004 and 1,005. So it can be, I mean, including the 13th. Do you know that in a year you can set aside 23, 24, 25,000 euros? In short, as an old man, I can tell you 10 years pass very quickly. You've set aside 250,000 euros. With 250,000 euros in 10 years, you buy an apartment to rent out, or you make investments in ETFs. If you buy Bitcoin during this period, they yield very quickly.
Besides, think about it. Even if one doesn't want to invest, but you do this for 10 years. You bought a house without taking out a mortgage?
Not having a mortgage gives you freedom. Incredible.
Damn, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Because even in the financial field, it's true that they say in some cases it's not worth buying a house, it might be better to rent, etc. The fact is that with the times we live in, if you lose your job, if you have a house, at least you have a roof over your head. Where else would you stay? You'll eat rice and potatoes for a month, but at least you have shelter. You're too kind. You know what? You know what, Fabio? And maybe people wonder how I really managed to live with 500. No, because living with so little, it's enough if you want, if you want. He says he'll be brief since most followers aren't aware. But how does this guy manage with so little? The fact is that there's more to it than just a large component of saving. This is very important and is part of the broader philosophy that I try to promote with my channel, which is the philosophy of voluntary simplicity. There's also self-production. For example, I have two gardens, one small and one large, where I grow my own food. For all of the summer, much of the fall and spring, lots of vegetables, fruit, and so at the end of the summer, I freeze it. I create large soups. I use them for the winter, so I have a very strong part of self-production from the point of view of food. Then I live in Trentino, so I have the opportunity to go every year to chop wood in the forest. So I heat up the winter with the wood I cut in the forest. And so there I have a very low expense from the energy point to heating, which greatly affects family expenses on the family budget. I had the opportunity to install and build a fairly powerful photovoltaic system on the roof of the house. My cost electrical energy is produced almost entirely, and I also sell it to the state. And every year from this sale, I earn 900 euros a year, which covers the cost of all the other bills, like garbage or water, for example. And so I practically have zero bills. And so it's clear that I make up for the need for money, however, through self-production, both energy and food. I bake bread and pizza at home, make my own broth, and use sourdough instead of yeast. I never go to the restaurant to eat. I make the pizza myself, but I have a wood oven because I get the wood from the forest. I don't know. I make cakes instead of buying snacks. It's not that I don't go to the supermarket. I go there to buy basic things, flour, salt, things that I can't. It's not that I have wheat. I produce my own wheat to make polenta. But I wanted to tell the people who follow you, who maybe don't know me, that I spend so little because I produce everything I need myself. I have no expenses. That's the issue.
And then, as you were saying, this is another question I wanted to ask you because the concept is misunderstood. Progress has been slow. It's not like you just arrived. And in fact, I wanted you to explain or at least talk to me a bit about the concept of winning the lottery. I know that one of your most viewed videos on the YouTube channel is how to win at scratch off tickets. I mean, why do people, when it comes to change or achieving goals or the famous success, I also thought it was an instant hit.
So, among other things, that video dates back to when I was shooting videos with the GoPro and artificially trying to give it a professional appearance. Instead, it's visually awful. I would like the people who are following us right now to go and try to win at scratch cards. Stop working and look at what a horrendous thing I had produced at the time. Well, then there's this idea in change in general. We have this idea that the turning point happens immediately. Suddenly, it's a classic in our life. This thing, in my opinion, also comes from certain habits that we have. I remember very well when I was working, we would find ourselves maybe then after work having a drink at the bar and there, maybe a bit under the influence of alcohol. We would say, now I'm going to drop everything, open a kiosk in Mexico and send everything to hell and change my life. But then afterwards, nothing ever came of it. That's the problem with this kind of change. Like, whether it's a change like the one I made, which is going abroad, or changing your life in some other way. The thing is, the likelihood of failing when you take a leap into the unknown is extremely high. It's almost certain. It's almost certain. Have you had this negative experience?
Yes, 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 absolutely. In fact, sorry, I interrupt you. Then I immediately give you the floor. I'm actually making the video of my story. It's the video that has required the most work of all since I started making videos. And I did it just like that. And I really hurt myself, really hurt.
However, let's say if I can break a lance in your favor, unfortunately, it's something our system instills in us. This is when on the news they advertise person X who has won the Super Lotto. Going back to your example of my video. And so he turned around, and at that point, he will be set for life and can do whatever he wants. That thing fuels the idea within us. I'd call it a dream. But it's more of a belief that to turn things around, you have to wait for a moment of that kind. The problem is that for the vast majority of people, 99.9%, that kind of moment will never come. And unfortunately, as your case demonstrates, those who think this way really risk getting hurt. But again, it's because we're raised this way from a young age. We're not used to slow change, which requires effort, a lot of commitment, a lot of introspection. They never explain this to us. The investment in time, calmly saving, sacrifice, they don't teach us that. We live in a world where everything has to be immediate, otherwise it's not good, and then it's not good, we don't want it. So we're not used to this. We are victims of this thing. Here we are all victims of this thing, here simply because we are born. In our society, change happens slowly. The decision to stop working or to change one's life is always a change that comes about through first a modification of one's values, a revisiting of one's values, a change in perspective. I see the world in a different way. Then, after understanding that money is no longer an end for things, but a means to obtain more money, this will help you achieve your dreams. And in the end, when you're truly ready, even if not completely, because no one ever is, when you feel about 70 or 80% ready, start. Now, waiting for perfection means you'll never act. Perfection is unattainable. Reaching 70 or 80% of your abilities makes you feel comfortable. So there, finally, you have a foundation on which you can truly speak. I make a change, but if I fall protected. I still have a margin. That's it. This is fundamental. Change must be gradual.
Yes, I agree. I repeat, I've experienced it on my own skin. Then you always hope that there is that breakthrough, that thing, but exactly, then it never comes. Well, anyway, luckily I managed to start fixing things also thanks to your books. In fact, earlier you were saying thank you for everything. But I really say it from the heart because it's really like that. I mean, where I am now. Even what I've put away, the way of thinking, and I'm trying to pass this on to my wife as well. She now realizes too. It was also thanks to your books. So if I say it, it's because I really had a change. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it.
I'm very pleased that then it's the purpose for which I write the books, trying to explain that, trying to help people understand that a certain choice is possible to make. A better life is possible, but it requires calm and the right knowledge.
Exactly.
I'm pleased anyway, I'm happy. And then anyway, let's say I don't take all the credit. Surely a good part of the fact that you got up is also due to the fact that you have a great willpower. No, because how many people actually let themselves go when they fall? Instead, if you then made it, it means that anyway, you are a strong person, you have a great willpower. So this honors you.
I'm lucky because this gift it's a gift that I have. Yes, definitely this is true. But you know the fact. Anyway, when you want to solve something, you search until in the end you manage to find the right information. So it's true, it all depends on us, just like when I coach someone. It's the same thing. They thank me. I say, look, you did the work. I mean, I am a facilitator because I mainly use questions, so I don't have any strange tricks, natural language processing, complex things, and the person does the work. Now, it's true that it's a team effort. We do it together, but then it's you who have to turn around. Francesco, drop everything is the last of your books I haven't read. I am moving abroad, as the title says.
That's right. I drop everything and go abroad.
Okay, can you explain 2 or 3 concepts? How can this thing be done? Is it because you also own a house in the Canary Islands, as you mentioned?
Yes, so where does all this come from? It comes from the fact that I haven't worked enough. I haven't worked 20 years. I've worked almost 20 years. Of course, I won't have access to the pension. And of course, I don't want to take the citizenship income or social checks. I don't want to be a burden on society because I haven't done anything. Then after I ask society to support me, this thing isn't even morally right. So at a certain point, I asked myself the question that almost everyone asks, or at least almost everyone asks me, If you don't work all your life, what will you do about retirement? What will you do when you're old? You won't be able to go cut wood in the forest. You won't be able to do many things. My 97-year-old aunt does nearly more than I do. So what have I thought? I thought since when I saved time to build the house I live in, I had a small capital left over, very small, but not enough to invest in a remunerative way. I said there must be a place abroad where I can, for example, buy an apartment that I will then rent out when I'm old, or I will go live there. And I will rent out my apartment here and my house here. And so that will be my pension. So I did a big search. I scanned 12, 14. Now, I don't even remember how many I review in that book you mentioned. Places in the world where you can go live with a little. But above all, the apartments are cheap, the houses are cheap, life is cheap. And I discovered, among other things, that there are places in the world where, if you want, it's not my case, but where, if you want, you can also receive the pension net of taxes. That is, you are in Italy, you move to Portugal, the Canary Islands, other places are Tunisia, etc., where there you receive your Italian pension net of taxes, therefore higher than what you would receive in Italy. Legally, there are bilateral agreements between many countries. I review them in this book that you mentioned, among all the places in the world that I have tried to review, understand and comprehend, so to speak. I found the Canary Islands, particularly the island of Fuerteventura, which represented the right compromise. And there I bought an apartment for very little, taking advantage of a time when the market was very low, the housing market, the real estate market was very low. So I have this small apartment where I stayed for a long time. In the past, when I still had children who didn't go to school, and so I could stay there. Now that they go to school, I can't go there as often anymore. But then when I'm old, maybe I'll go live there, or I'll rent it out and live here, or vice versa. I'll decide. This book came from this research. Why did I say wow? I translated the laws of 14 countries to understand how the legislature, the norms work. I tried to understand what the job opportunities are, the cost of living. I have all this material. Why not make a book out of it, a real manual to help people go live abroad? And there I wrote this book. Abroad is an opportunity. In conclusion, it's a very interesting one. The problem is that buying an apartment abroad to rent is extremely risky. Only if you have a person of great trust like I do. And I chose that place exactly for this reason. Of the island of Fuerteventura, where I have a person of trust whom I blindly trust, and therefore to whom I can entrust the management of my apartment. Otherwise, the risk of being cheated, of having agencies that, for example, a classic scam, the agency rents, the property tells you that it is not rented, but in the meantime, it takes the rent and does not give it to you. Things like this happen, as well as fake notaries who make you fake sales, and so you lose all your money. Things that actually fall to the canaries, for example. Okay, it's important to take this step, which is very interesting. The power of investment is because one of the big problems we have now is that there are no big returns around. It's hard to invest a little money to get big returns. It's no longer the 80s. Now, abroad offers a great investment opportunity, but only under the condition I mentioned.
Okay, great. So this could also be an option. And for retirement, I also want to take early retirement. Are there opportunities or things that can be done to replace it?
So, of course, we start from the extreme case. Okay, it's not ethically something I suggest doing. It's not correct, but people need to know that if they have worked at least 15 years, but actually not even that. If you are in particular economic conditions, you always have the possibility of receiving the Social Security check. If you have a very low income, there is now the citizenship pension introduced as part of the Five-Star Movement's citizenship income. Mind you, the Social Security check has always existed. So even if things went very badly, you still have those 400 euros a month from the Social Security check guaranteed. It's not ethically right. I repeat this because I will never resort to this in the future, not even if I were in trouble, because you can't just not contribute to society your whole life and then take money from others who have worked. It's not right that there's this parachute that exists. So it's important to mention it. Like all things, things exist. Each person chooses based on conscience to do. The other thing to do, the one I suggest, is to create a passive income, like passive incomes. In my opinion, there are two main focuses right now. The first is accumulation plans. The famous PAC. So, for example, you subscribe to an exchange traded fund, classic exchange traded fund, exchange traded fund. You make 600 euros a day with options. Okay. These platforms are not entirely innocent either. From this point of view, however, for example, Money Farm is a platform that allows you to put in money a little at a time, to have very low costs of managing your money. Invest in ETFs, which are very diversified financial products, which have very low returns. However, over the long term, especially if you take advantage of what is called compound interest, that is what you earn. It returns to the capital, creating a growing capital that yields even more over time. This can lead you in 30 years to have accumulated perhaps a part of your salary or a part of the money you put into a small income that is a substitute for the pension. The supplementary pensions sold to us at work aren't much different from these things. They are plans where you invest money and receive returns. It's the same. Only if you do it independently, you might have a bit more control. Is it true that you don't have those benefits that they give you? Well, here we're getting into complex territory, but you can do it independently through platforms like Money Farm. I don't take a penny from Money Farm. To mention it, I'm not affiliated, but I know it. I've used it. I've talked about it in other videos. It's very, very interesting. The other thing is real estate. In my opinion, real estate is another fundamental form of investment. The problem is that real estate requires quite a large capital, in the sense that if you have to get an apartment that gives you a rental income, it can easily replace, especially if you rent to students or rent for tourism. And I tell you this from Trentino, where the city of Trento is full of students and the mountain valleys are full of winter and summer tourists. These are rentals that yield a lot, a lot. 3-4% net of all expenses, of all annual taxes, even of the imposta municipale unica, the second home, which is a lot. The problem is that these types of investments require having a fairly significant starting capital. 200,000 or 300,000 euros is an amount most people don't have or can't save quickly, especially if they're not young. Then there are those who are lucky, those who have an inheritance, those who have. In short, so for me, these are the two forms of investment that can allow you, leaving aside that issue precisely that I was saying of the social check that you get anyway if you are on the street. However, these are the two investment forms to focus on right now. Then years ago when I wrote Stop Working, there were still government bonds that yielded interesting figures. Now we are with inflation at least 0.3% this year. So government bonds can never yield.
Okay. Fantastic. I'm happy to be on the right track since starting at TIFF. Well, I'm also starting to study personal finance a little bit, which I'm interested in anyway. But besides that, it's really interesting indeed the fact that I wanted to interview you specifically for the discussion about living with little, the discussion about needs, about objects. This was, in my opinion, a really important thing. And indeed, guys, I still invite you to follow Francesco on his channel, on his blog, because these are really important concepts that allow you to live better. I mean, at least that's what I'm finding. So I think everyone should have at least a minimum of knowledge and information about these things. Well, Francesco, I thank you. I don't know if there's something you want to add, something you want to say.
Let's say I could add the fact that what we talked about today, except let's say the financial aspect, more the aspect of living with little, etc., is well summarized in what is the manifesto of voluntary simplicity that we created as a community, in which the people of the community also participated. So if you search on Google Manifesto for voluntary simplicity, you find a series of, I wouldn't call them rules, I would like to call them guidelines for your life, for one's own life, that if followed somehow lead you to see the world in a different way, to live in a different way. Compared to the canons, the standards that have been taught to us, let's say, our normality. If you want to learn more, search Google for Manifesto for Voluntary Simplicity to find our group's philosophy.
Okay, anyway, I will put all the links in the description of this video, Francesco's site, the channel, the books, everything. And that's it. Guys, I really hope I have given you rich, important content. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, what I try to do is bring guests who can add value to my channel, but above all, who can help people improve their lives. So I hope I did it. Write me in the comments exactly how you found the interview, if you liked it, and that's it. Francesco, I really thank you a lot because I'm a fan of yours.
I naturally thank you for the opportunity, for everything. I'm very happy that my books really helped you in some way, because you really know how it is. For a writer, maybe a year or two goes by, closed off writing a book, then he throws it online, throws it on the market, and doesn't know how it will go. Then knowing that it really serves someone, that it was really useful, is important. It gives the strength to go on. Thank you so much for your testimony and for inviting me this evening.
It comes from the heart because it's really like that. And I'm continuing on this path precisely because I saw the results immediately. I understood that a significant change could be made. So thank you. All right, guys. Francesco and I are saying goodbye. Subscribe to the channel. Click on the bell. Also follow Francesco. You can find all his links in the description. And bye.